everyone. Welcome back to Football Movial. I'm Dan. I'm here with Brendan.
Hey, everyone.
We're here for episode number 2, where we have watched United Passions. And a brief intro to United Passions. This is, I think, their official synopsis of the film, maybe, but United Passions tells the story of how FIFA was created and grew, highlighting the efforts of leaders like Jules Rimet, Joao Havelange, and Sepp Blatter. It covers the challenges they faced in making football a global sport.
What about the challenges in watching?
It was a little bit of a tough watch. Firstly, where did you watch this?
So initially I saw that it was on, or apparently on Apple TV, but then, which I was surprised by.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went investigating, wasn't on Apple TV. So I think at one point it was, but then they discovered that it was propaganda rubbish. And so it was taken off. And then I ended up I tried to find it as a download,
Mm-hmm.
but then I really couldn't be bothered waiting for this 2 gigabyte monstrosity to download. So using the VPN, went into YouTube and found it.
And then if you go, just chuck on the VPN for the US, the whole movie's up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And no one gives a shit about the copyright.
No one cares. No.
And like, there are very few films that are actually just like uploaded in full on YouTube and just stay there.
Yeah.
But this one, I think it's just like, it's not even worth the time for us to click copyright violation claim and try and get this like struck and taken down from YouTube.
And I can only imagine that the whole purpose of the film was, like any film, to get people to watch this and sort of change the FIFA narrative. So when they discovered that no one's going to pay for that privilege, well, at least if it's up for free, someone might watch it.
Yeah, just an act of desperation.
Yeah. I mean, they're not getting a licensing deal with anyone.
No. And you're right. Like when I looked at it as well, like it did say Apple TV, even Amazon Prime Video, I think it was listed as well. Not gone.
Yeah.
Gone for both of those.
Yeah.
But someone on YouTube, yep, we'll just chuck it up.
Yeah.
And go from there. I think a bit of background to the film. This was released in 2014. So slightly just before all the FIFA corruption came out, and then the subsequent docos about all that. But I found this quite interesting that, FIFA, apparently they gave 27 million, and I think that's US, of the budget to the filmmakers to make the film. And the other 5 million was from the Azerbaijani government to shoot some of it there.
Yeah. I mean, FIFA, unlike any other association, really has this ability to unlock these random countries with, like, you see this with World Cups all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to go to these countries that like have limited sort of like international scope and give them an opportunity to like, oh, you could be involved in the FIFA film. Like, well, hang on, did you
give
go
us some cash?
Yeah, did you go to the other association? Don't worry, we didn't go to any. We came to you first.
Yeah, this is email 192.
Yeah.
That they sent out.
Sure. I mean, the Azerbaijan government, I mean, I would imagine that's a fair lick, 5 million for.
Yeah, I'd assume so. Like,
I mean, maybe not. But...
Or I wonder if the government's just like, if we give you the 5 million, you'll then spend it back on our local production team. So we're effectively just putting 5 million into our economy.
I mean, let's be honest. It was probably a bribe of some sort.
Must be a bribe. Maybe it's like, we'll do this, and then you give us a Europa League final. What about that?
Azerbaijan will probably get the next World Cup.
It's very possible. Apparently, FIFA's original title suggestions for the film were Men of Legend and The Dream Makers, which I think sets the tone perfectly for the type of narrative that FIFA are looking to tell in an inspired by true events story about themselves, that they have funded basically the whole thing. That they're thinking like, you know what, let's call it The Dream Makers or Men of Legend.
The timeline is so interesting as well, because you get the sense, because I think they were pushing for it to come out earlier before this whole thing blew up. So you sense that they were very aware of the timeline with all the corruption as well, that they wanted to try and change the narrative before that ruling.
Hey, who can we get? Can we get Sam Neill in here? That'll just wash over all the corrupt events that are happening from that. But I think you're right. I think they were trying to push it to come out like 2013, 2014, something like that. And it came out, I think it was shown at Cannes in 2014. And then in, I think, 10 cinemas in the US in 2015. And it got $319 on its opening day.
Did you read that little bit of trivia about the screenings in Phoenix, Arizona?
Oh, like one person?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like $9
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah. I just love that. That was so good.
It's so amazing. And then I think it made like 918 apparently in its first weekend, and then the distributors pulled it because they're like, well, okay.
Yeah.
But for some reason in Russia it grossed like £150,000
For some reason.
for some reason.
They're more open to the sort of dark arts, I would say.
Yes, this is a very good film. This. Very strong characters here.
Sepp, good leadership.
But I think it's roughly considered around about 200 grand that it brought in off a $32 million budget. Pretty bad.
Not what you want.
Not what you want at all. So I think to get into the film, like it's quite a slog to watch. But we start around the like early 1900s, 1902, 1904, something like that, and we see Carl Hirschman, played by Fisher Stevens, right?
And I was so disappointed because I love Fisher Stevens.
Same here. Ever since Early Edition,
Yeah,
back in the day, Succession, like he made the David Beckham doco.
yeah, he's a great filmmaker as well. Like, I mean,
What are you doing?
pops up in all the Wes Anderson's movies. Like, he's got like this great little corner of the industry,
Yeah,
and then
just that wide jaw.
yeah, tart it with this and very narrow neck.
Yeah, so it's all. But he's in everything. Like you look through his things, you're like, oh, he was on Friends back in the day.
Yeah,
Oh, he was on this. He was on that. Like, I disappointed is the right word for that because
Yeah.
it's like to see someone like him pop up, you're like, I'm disappointed in that.
Yeah.
To see Sam Neill being in this, I'm like, and we'll get to him properly later, but disappointed. Gérard Depardieu, I don't even know what's going on there.
Yeah, seriously.
Disappointed once more.
yeah.
And then Tim Roth as well. Very disappointed. We should note a lot of these actors have come out afterwards and said how disappointed
Yeah.
they were with it. I think it's worth reading a quote from the director Frédéric Auburtin or Auburtin. He claims that he inserted some parts of the film into it ironically.
Yeah.
He said he was going for a balance between a Disney propaganda film and a Costa Gavras Michael Moore movie. Bit of a stretch, maybe, on that one.
Seems slightly revisionist as well.
A little bit. And then he says, this is quote, now I'm seen as now I'm seen as bad as the guy who brought AIDS to Africa or the guy who caused the financial crisis. My name is all over this mess, and apparently I'm a propaganda guy making films for corrupt people. It should be noted he wrote this film as well.
Mm-hmm.
So his hands are well and truly in it. And he hasn't directed or written anything since this in 2014.
I mean, I find it incredible like when you take the check and then you are so disappointed by the backlash. It's
Yeah.
like that's what you signed up for. I would imagine he would have been paid handsomely for writing and directing.
He
Like,
probably got that whole like Azerbaijani check. $5 million. There you
and
go.
I can't imagine he wasn't communicating directly with Sepp Blatter.
No, and Sepp Blatter apparently was like all over this.
Mm.
Because that's what Tim Roth mentioned as well, where he said afterwards again, coming back and going like, yeah, look, I apologize. I didn't question the director and I didn't question the script. This is a role that will have my father turning in his grave. And then he admitted that he just took the job for money, saying it helped him out of a financial hole. And then he went on to criticize FIFA after that as well. But there's something in there from one of the reporters in it, which I think he says is like, Sepp Blatter made them take out lines because he didn't want those type of questions being asked to fictional Sepp Blatter. And it just shows you how Sepp Blatter is like controlling the whole narrative.
Yeah, and he knows that. The actor knows that because he had to do a heap of ADR stuff. So yeah, there's clearly just been like they've shown the cut and they're like, well, no, we need to like polish this up. Like,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because I noticed that throughout the film where like there were just strange cuts beyond just sort of, like strange filmmaking. Like it was just like, oh no, we've got to get away from this because we're covering up a line that's been replaced.
Yeah.
I noticed that especially with Sam Neill. Like, but yeah, clearly that's happened throughout the movie.
Yeah, and it's so weird in terms of pacing,
Yeah.
the film. So, like, roughly, it's kind of broken into two parts. So we start with at the beginning. I love the disclaimer of like, while this story is inspired by actual events and real people, certain characters portrayed, characterization, scenes, and dialogue spoken represented work of dramatic fiction.
Yeah.
The whole goddamn thing is fiction.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
And that also feels like a insert after the fact, after Backlash.
Yeah. they're like, legally, we have to put this in
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's just all made up.
I am almost certain that it would have started with based on true events.
Yeah.
And then after the Backlash, they insert that.
I'm sure Sepp would have been like, can we just put up it's a documentary?
Yeah.
This is all actual footage
Yeah.
from 1900. Come on,
Yeah.
let's get this going. It's so weird. We talked about Azerbaijan. A shot that comes in at the very, very start and it keeps recurring throughout the film, which is, again, such evidence of this like propaganda aspect of it, is we open on the kids playing on a dirt pitch. And it's just a group of kids, very culturally ambiguous. I noticed it's like, literally, it's like, how many different races of children can we get into one shot? And so when you're trying to look where it is in the world, you're like, this is so random. There's this tiny little like town with a few concrete buildings, a giant dirt pitch, and then just like a whole bunch of kids from all over the place, including one white redhead girl.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, don't think we don't care about girls and women in the world.
Don't worry, she has a whole arc. But it was also like, it was as if it was like an AI developed image or something. It's like, can we represent grassroots football?
Yeah,
It's like,
everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. It's like there's an Italian nonna watching
Yeah.
in the window. It's like, oh, it was just bizarre.
It's so weird. And it's like 100% like, diversity and representation in films is extremely important. But when you go to this sort of extent and level with it, it just looks quite bizarre because it's like, where it's opening a shot, and usually we're trying to set where we are, but we don't get any indication of that at all. And then we keep jumping back to this, and there's nothing happening in this, for the most part, in these shots. It's just the kids playing on this dirt pitch, and we're just showing like how wonderful it is of all the kids of the world playing together and playing this beautiful game. And they just use it throughout the film to like, maybe when they had to cut stuff out, they're like, well, let's just show those, modern kids playing on dirt again for a couple of seconds.
We got about 2 hours of footage. I mean, we can cut back a fair bit.
We flew these kids in from everywhere, so we've got to make up for this cost.
But it's so consistent as well with FIFA's narrative around these corruption allegations. Like the whole time, especially like watching this film after only having recently watched the FIFA Uncovered, or FIFA Revealed, or
I think it's FIFA Uncovered.
FIFA Uncovered.
I'm sure we will rewatch that at some stage.
Yeah. It's interesting how they try and spin the narrative, because all the cash taken from all these other associations around the world is not bribery, it's to grow the game.
Yeah.
And that is the whole sort of thesis throughout the film, that we did this to bring football to the masses.
Yeah. And it's very weird. It's like they're always like pitching a villain in some way.
Yeah.
And it's like when the film starts, you have Fisher's character, Carl, and then I think a guy from, I think he's Belgian, or whatever, Robert Guérin, who's his bud. They go over to England, and then this is like the first big moment where they're trying to form FIFA. And it's what I found is just so ridiculous about this is that, like, the English as being the villains is a recurring thing that keeps on coming back throughout the film, but it's laughably the case. And this is not to say that like England have done amazing things throughout history and that's it. Like, of course. And I'm sure in this FIFA story, like would have done some things that are not that favorable as well. But it's just so weird that it's like we start with like England is so bad, they hate us. Look how horrid they are. And it's like, that's interesting, Sepp, given that you've had a lot of problems with the FA over the years. And we just see it constantly throughout. But I found it so funny to like start with like interrupting a game of football and be like, hey, do you want to join our federation? And the guy's like, hey, I've got a game to coach, boys. And they're like, you'll be out of it forever.
Come back in 40 years.
It's like what the Robert guy, he's such a hot-headed guy. Just like he snaps instantly Like they've made this trip then by, I assuming, boat. Took a
Yeah.
while to just rock up there, and it's like, no, Robert, when we get there, just maybe just chill a little bit. Let's ease into the convo.
Maybe let's wait until
just
full
snaps.
time. Let's not go in at halftime or while the game's being played. Like,
And he just snaps. We'll exclude you from all the international matches. And it's like, Robert, chill, relax.
we've got some time before we have to be back on the boat.
Yeah.
Okay, like let's just calm down. But the English thing was interesting because like it sort of starts out as the whole angle with the English initially was, oh well, they're not being inclusive. Like they don't want
Yeah.
any part to do with FIFA. But very quickly it was like, not only that, but they're terribly racist.
Yeah.
It was like, oh no, this isn't hard enough. We got to go in harder.
Yeah. And because I think the first response we get is like, what do those bloody frogs want?
Yeah. Oh, and it gets way worse than that.
It gets way worse soon.
Yeah.
It's just so wild. So wild. We then jump forward to Paris 94, the formation of FIFA, which I found so funny that we get this, like, it's just like 8 dudes sitting in like a bread and cheese room. And from like all different like European nations, like there's a German guy, there's a guy from Belgium, there's a Dutch guy, like it's all this. And it's so weird, like if this whole message of like inclusivity is there in this dark room now being like, we're the only ones qualified to oversee the game internationally.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is getting off track so quickly.
Yeah.
And then Robert, like, he stands up and he's like, we're going to knock the Brits off their English asses.
Robert, I don't know.
down.
How did Robert like just get the presidency unopposed as well? Like he did not seem qualified at all.
Yeah, it makes no sense that it's like this guy, they're all like, calm down, Robert. Who should be president? Robert.
I think Fisher Stevens deserves this more than you do.
Yeah, like he seems to be the more measured one that they're presenting. But it's just so wild. It's just so wild. It's like, this is the place that we're going to start with at the film. And then I think what happens is like we get into this really weird thing around the pacing. We jump around a lot, and some settings we stand in for like a minute, 2 minutes maybe. Others it's 10 seconds. Other times it's like 15 minutes. Because from there we just jump to like the Paris 1924 Olympics and Gérard Depardieu coming in as Jules Rimet in a very bizarre scene as well. Just like being a dickhead at a press conference. And like, there's so much of like, how are we joining all the dots here?
Yeah. Oh, and I think they clearly was like, oh, well, we've got 100 years to cover here. We better speed up. And the frequent use of they went to so many crossfades. It was just like crossfade.
Yeah.
Like, let's just get through this stuff. Like, we have to get moving. We have to get to Sepp.
Yeah.
You know, like
Sepp's demanded he wants half of this film to be about him.
Yeah, Sepp is not going to be happy if he's not like, you know, if he's not on the screen in the first hour.
Because it's just so weird. It's like they'll have this really confusing scene, and it's like, Uruguay, you're not the champions, Olympic football, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And like my understanding of the time is just that like FIFA were involved in organizing early Olympic football competitions.
Okay, right.
But the IOC wanted it to remain amateur. And they're like, we want it to be amateur athletes, that's it. FIFA were like, no, professionals. We want the best product. And there was just a lot of butting heads about that. And I think that's why we just get this weird, like, antagonistic scene here. And we get a lot of exposition in the film around that too, where it's, a scene doesn't really make sense. And then you get here 2 people in the audience going, who was that? That's Jules Rimet. He's the president of some federation no one even knows about.
Yeah.
And it's like,
awful.
These scenes are just like insane. It's just insane. Like, there's no story being told here.
I found like, so shortly after this, he comes up with the idea of the World Cup, which I'm pretty sure it happened how they showed it. Like he just came up with the idea in the back of a cab or something.
Which took him 20 years to come up with?
Yeah, I know.
Like,
why did you form FIFA if you weren't going to have matches? Like, like maybe a cup? I don't know. Like,
yeah. And it's like, one of the guys there is like, a world competition? He's mad.
Yeah.
And then Carl is like, no, he's a visionary.
We've been planning this for 20 years.
It's like, this is so stupid.
Because the thing I find interesting with parts of this film is that, and I found it interesting as well in FIFA Uncovered because Sepp Blatter is part of that documentary. I don't know how he agreed to it, but is that they're almost not aware sometimes of the activities that they're involved in.
Yeah.
Like the way they depict it, as early as 1930, the World Cup was bought.
Yeah.
Like Uruguay come to them and say, we want a World Cup, we want to host it. And it's like there's no process. And then suddenly they're pulling out Uruguay from the envelope. And it's like this bizarre statement that like nothing has changed.
Yeah. And it's like, it's very, very odd in this that a lot of the film is dealing with like FIFA saying we're actually anti-corruption. We don't stand for that. And so when we get this, like the delegate from Uruguay is like, hey, what about you come here and we'll give you a bunch of money for it? And the first response from Jules Rimet is like, we have honor in this competition. Will you pay for the referees? You pay for the team? We pay for this, that, everything else. And I think at the time it's like Jules Rimet, like my understanding is that he came from like a poorer sort of background and was very much about like the working class, lifting up the working class in a way, but also at the time was heavily criticized for how these initial World Cups were handed out for like PR stunts, like in Uruguay and Italy and things like that. But then it's like in the film, it's like he's just a man just standing up for like honor and integrity. And it just feels so weird that we get introduced pretty early to like his daughter, Annette. And it took me a while to research and find if she even existed. And like, I think she did, but there's no real evidence of her doing much around FIFA, but it just seems like she's used in such I think a pretty like bad way in this film of basically just giving like Jules Rimet someone to talk to with his ideas and also being like, we better have a woman in this because, we just want to like appeal. And it's like, yeah, like you should have a better gender balance in films, but it's like, if you're going to do that, like also just give the character some substance rather than just like, you're just here just to say how good your dad is.
Yeah.
And to be like leered at by some of the male characters weirdly in it. It's just like, it's really, really odd. And it just, I don't know, it feels like a bit uncomfortable.
She's literally just there to like sort of correct his path. Whenever he has like some doubt, she like steers him back.
Yeah.
Like she has the best line of the movie, I think, when she goes, when have dreams ever been appropriate?
Yeah. Is that when they're on the boat?
Yeah.
It's
and I think Jules Rimet turns to her and says, yes, you were always so smart.
Yeah.
And then now he's back on track and he can go about organizing the World Cup.
Yeah. It's so weird. And it's like she's used in a way which I think is just before that when they are talking about what you mentioned earlier of the English just coming in and being extremely racist, where they are at a convention to celebrate the World Cup going to Uruguay. And then there's this character called Larson. He's just called Larson. I don't know if that's a real person. I don't think it is, because it seems like they're just in there to inject racism into it and be like, look how racist the Brits are.
Yeah.
And then just some of the lines in there, just like the Zulus, the natives of Africa are stupid and undisciplined. It's just their nature. And you're just like, what is this? And then your daughter, and there's a bunch of other lines, which I don't even really want to read out, like they're so bad, but it says then, it's basically just kind of like she thinks anyone can play the sport, and it gets more explicit with details, but it's like, send her back to sewing and housekeeping. Her pretty little head will be filled with less nonsense. Yeah. So again, it's just kind of like needlessly making like, all right, the British, they're racist, they're sexist, they're this. And then Jules Rimet and his daughter are there to fight against all of these things.
Especially in a setting where there's not going to be any historical context. They're like at a dinner party. It's like, there's clearly no recording of this. There's no like historical fact behind it. They're just like, no, we've got to inject this. So it's just all these like, these lines.
And it's weird because it's like Egypt had joined FIFA already by then in 1923. Women had already played football for crowds during World War One. So it's like, it's just a way to just like attack this, make England the villain. It's like they've gone, we need someone to always be fighting against in this film.
Yeah.
And in the first half, it seems very much like the English, they're the bad guys. They're always going to come back to that. And we're standing up for a lot of things, including a lot of like kind of strange, like African football references. They use that as like to propel this narrative of how they're standing up for the good fight.
I think that's
So
like the
odd.
unfortunate thing about the story, like, is the whole reason why FIFA had like this free reign for all this corruption is because they didn't have any blowback. They had
Yeah.
there was no antagonist in the story, even though they try and create one here. I mean, I'm sure early on the FA was sort of part of the discussion, but um, yeah, I mean, the whole reason why they got into the mess that they did is because there were no guardrails. It was like they were their own state,
Yeah.
basically.
Because kind of do what they want,
Yeah.
whilst also saying that we're fighting against the guys who think that they can just do what they want.
Mm.
It's like, no, you're doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
We get some really weird like montages in this film as well, and I think the first one we maybe see is around about the Uruguay World Cup 1930 in Montevideo. Like we just randomly cut to them walking through the stadium being built, and then to a scene with Lafleur, the sculptor, and he's
Mm.
just this eccentric dude in his studio with other guys just like painting women who are posing.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's this like eccentric mad scientist type of guy who's like carving the first like World Cup mold out of clay, not even touching it when he carves it, which I found so hilarious to see.
Mm.
But it's just so weird. It's just like so disjointed.
It was at this point in the film where I was like, what questions can I think of for Dan that are not related to the movie? Because I was checked out.
Yeah.
I was like, I think at about this point I was also thinking like, will Dan know if I don't watch the rest of this movie? Like,
Probably not.
probably not. I went on and I watched the rest of it. But the question I thought of at the time was like, which trophy do you prefer? The original World Cup trophy or the modern World Cup trophy?
I prefer the modern World Cup one, but
Yeah.
I think that's also just based in nostalgia
Yeah.
of like growing up as a kid watching like the first World Cup I remember watching is World Cup 94, seeing that trophy. Like, so I think it's attached to that.
So when did it change over? It must have been like maybe the 70s.
70s, it's like when I think Brazil won their third.
Okay, yeah.
Then the Jules Rimet trophy they get to keep it. And then there's a whole other story about that of like it disappeared. It was like in England for 66, it disappeared when it was on display before the World Cup. And then like a dog found it in a park and the owner got like £100,000 or something, like the equivalent of that.
So
in
is that
today's
known
money.
as the Jules Rimet trophy?
That's the Jules Rimet one, this initial one.
Yeah, okay, right.
Which is like an angel type figure
Yeah.
holding like a cup on top of it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the current one's called, but
It was interesting that they skipped 66 as well. There was no coverage.
oh, there's a lot of skipping that they do later on. It's just so bizarre. Like the other scene that I wonder if you enjoy the scene as much as I did, but it's when they're on the boat going to Montevideo, and you have Jules Rimet and Carl. They're just walking around, and then there's only 4 teams on the boat, and they're just like doing these weird like exercises to keep fit because they're traveling from Europe to Uruguay. And it's just so weird. Like Gérard Depardieu is walking around just like pointing. There's no dialogue to it. He's just like pointing at the guys, just like doing these weird like squat workouts on this boat. And it's just like, again, this leering stance of like these 2 older guys just walking around pointing at these men just running around. It just feels so odd. And yeah, because like at the time there were only 4 European teams that went over to Uruguay. And then that's pumped up again of like, that is for racist reasons, that's for that. And it's like, there might have been some element of that, but also apparently it's like a 3-month trip. So like players playing for clubs and stuff, they're like, we don't want to go away for 3 months.
And how
to
many
the outside of the world?
How
for
many
the first
countries
tournament.
have the resources?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Like,
So it's
how's an
just
Australian team going to get to Montevideo
Yeah.
at that point?
Yeah.
It's not happening.
100%. And this is again where it's like all this emotional hardship for Jules Rimet. And I think that's the point where the line you mentioned with his daughter. It's like, yeah, you have the right to make your dream come true, Daddy.
It's shocking.
So stupid. It's just wild. It's just wild.
At some point, like I wrote down here, like I just thought I was like watching an interactive timeline.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was that's sort of how it felt. It was like the screen was moving down and we're just like moving through history.
Yeah.
It was, and it's all like glossed over, and it was just the only good thing really is that they have all the footage. It's like
Yeah, we don't have to license it.
yeah, like we get to see Pele, and like we get to see all this history, and they're so tight on licensing that you never see that footage like in a film normally.
Yeah.
But I did like as well, like how they creatively tried to like integrate some of that footage into like I don't know if it was later in the film, but like there's I think it's like from like training footage, and Sepp Blatter's like walking down the touchline, and someone hits a shot. This is in real like archive footage, and then they cut to the filmed footage, and the ball runs in the background as if the shots continued from the archive.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I was just like, oh my gosh, like I just can't believe you went to such effort. Like there's so many other problems.
Yeah. It's like we've spent 6 months on this shot.
Yeah.
On making it align perfectly.
Yeah.
Could we fix the script?
No time.
No time. There's no time for that.
Sepp's happy.
It's. I feel like in this next phase of the film, this is where things get, to me, fully into propaganda type territory of like how great FIFA are and aren't they the saviors to the world. Because first we have Carl exiting the system, and this is where he's got some really weird lines in this interaction.
Carl's exit is excellent.
It's so bizarre. Like they're talking at the moment, like the depression is devastating, and somebody will be meant to take the blame. It could be the Jews, and it's like there's so much like of like is Jules Rimet like they're foreshadowing as this prophet is just calling all these things that are about to happen, or maybe the gypsies too, and then like when Carl's quitting and there's like this guy walking around like Mussolini.
But before that, Carl says, "Oh, I must apologize for my stock investments that apparently have like destroyed FIFA."
Yeah.
Oh my
It's like,
God.
oh great, it was Carl's fault for
Carl, if you
Great
just
Depression.
picked some better stocks, FIFA would be in a better place.
Yeah. And this is where it's really weird, right? With like when Carl leaves, he says the line that I found one of the most bizarre in the whole film. He's like, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to go. And Jules is like, oh, just stay. Maybe stay. But not really convincing him that hard. And then Carl's like, you know what? Kiss Annette goodbye for me, please.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird
Yeah.
to be like, I'm quitting my job. Also, give your daughter a kiss for me.
Yeah.
Like, we've got no semblance of their relationship other than when they met at his house and he just goes, hi, Annette. And that's it. And so it's weird again of like the way that Carl said it. It was like heartfelt thing of like, kiss Annette goodbye, please. Like,
It's bizarre.
why?
And then suddenly
Why?
he's just walking off and he'll just never be seen again.
And then he's done.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's possibly then we cut to like Berlin in 1936. And this is where things, I think, just get wild. Because then we've got like the Germans, the Italians, like they're all sitting around this big table, this big expensive, it looks like a castle or just some, some manor. And you've got the Germans, the German representative, I think Ivo Schricker. He says, my colleagues, I can assure you that Germany is opposed to any idea of war. And then
That didn't age well.
and then the Belgian guy replies like, how can you be sure? Has the Chancellor confided in you? The German guy goes, you know what? I haven't been so privileged. And it's just like, it's so wild. And then you've got like this Italian guy there, Barassi, who he's just like doing all these villainous like looks. And they're talking about Mussolini and Hitler being in bed together and all this sort of stuff. And then just like Rimet's just there, just like, hey, all these fascist doctrines go against everything our federation stands for. And it's like, is Jules Rimet calling now that like Germany are rearming and about to like, it's just so weird that they're like, this is what we really want to paint as this like part of this guy's legacy here is he was like calling the war and like trying to get the FIFA delegations to solve Let's not go to war, everyone. Football can solve this. FIFA can solve this.
Yeah, they're constantly like painted as the voice of reason
Yeah.
within these rooms. It's like I just can't believe that anyone thought that this was a good idea.
No, and this is where like Italy having the World Cup then, like, they Rimet was criticized for that, of like, this was used to promote Mussolini's regime. Yet in this, he's the one calling it out and saying like, well, Italy, when you hosted it, that was just to promote your regime. And it's like, but you orchestrated this.
That was like the really depressing thing about not just watching this, but watching the FIFA Uncovered, is that it's so shocking how effective this stuff has been. Like in terms of sports washing, which is like, that's a relatively modern term, but it's just been happening for so long. And it's like, even in the context of like modern World Cups, like as recently as Qatar, you have nearly a decade of allegations against FIFA, and it still doesn't harm the product somehow. Like
People watch and forget.
It's just it's incredible how much football is insulated from the actual associations around it.
Yeah.
It's
and it's like FIFA have used that to their advantage within this. Because it's just very revisionist history, it feels like, a lot of this story. Because we end up then cutting forward to 1942 in the throes of war, and they start talking about the death match.
Oh, I think this is probably the worst it gets.
I think this is rock bottom of like what they try and do to emotionally manipulate you as you're watching the film with the music's so dramatic and so sad. And they basically paint out this picture that like they're in Zurich. They're talking to they're talking about the death match. Now the death match was a real game that happened, or a series of games, and it happened in Ukraine, in Kiev. And so Germany, they'd invaded, they'd occupied, and I think they'd put like 600,000 people to work or something like that. And apparently at the time, like German soldiers would regularly play football against local teams, and they just like get teams together and play. This kind of portrays it that like, and how they say it is like Ukrainian prisoners had been taken out of a factory, dragged out. They were playing against like highly trained German soldiers, and there was a corrupt referee, and like they all faced a bullet to the back of their head. And it leads you to believe that like they all got killed, because it's like they could have stayed alive. And it's like, this didn't happen.
And most notably, this is the only section of the movie where they don't use archive footage for games. It's like just purely fabricated.
Purely fabricated. And it turns out later that in like, I think from like the 70s onwards, like eyewitness accounts were like, no, the referees weren't corrupt in these games. And the German soldiers played like 130 games against Ukrainian local teams, and they lost the majority of them. And like a few players from the Ukrainian team that played in this game, they were actually killed, but they were arrested and killed like either like a few weeks after, 6 months after, or whatever. And all the eyewitness accounts are saying like they don't think that had anything to do with this game. It was just part of all the other stuff going on. But it was so weird that this scene leaves you thinking that there was this game here, that this whole team had been killed and slaughtered by the Germans, and it doesn't clarify that up. And this was made put out in 2014, long after when this whole deathmatch story had been revised.
This whole section, it's like there's so many like fabricated elements to it that by the time you're like outraged by one, there's another one happening.
Yeah.
And it's like I felt like I had to do this whole like historical dive into but then you just become overwhelmed with like, well, the whole movie is just like, it's just like this.
You're right. Yeah, you realize if I touch one thing, I touch everything.
Yeah,
it's all made up.
Yeah.
It's all fabricated.
Yeah. So you just you just decide, oh well, I'll just let this finish and try not to think about it ever again.
It's just like and this is where I think like the director, you just can't play dumb at the end of this.
No.
If you're the director and the writer, Because there's got to be a line where you would go like, you know what, I'm not making this film anymore. Because at the end of this clip, like all we see is Gérard Depardieu, like as Jules Rimet going back to his house, looking sad, going into his little chapel, kneeling down, praying to a cross on the wall, as if it's like FIFA are fighting against all the injustices that are going on in the world. And like we have been led to believe there's this being slaughter of a match. And like, oh no, football and FIFA, can they come up against it? And it's just like, it's just wild.
And there's that, yeah, and there's the whole crossfade from the cross to Christ the Redeemer, and it's like, oh wow. And then obviously the synergy between Christ the Redeemer and the World Cup trophy.
Yep.
And it's like you don't have to be a genius to see the sort of connections they're trying to make.
And everything's fine then.
Yeah,
like because they're there in Brazil, and like Barassi, the Italian guy who they were button heads before, they're joking around. And they're like, you rascal, you! And then we get reintroduced to the English and the FA being the bad guys again.
Mm.
And they come back in and they have their little back and forth there. And it's like, the English speak about Wembley. Not anymore. Today is Brazil's day.
Did you...
So
I didn't
weird.
Why were they so intent on Brazil winning? Why were they so disappointed when Uruguay won?
I've got this as a note. Why are they so sad about Brazil losing?
Yeah.
Because it seemed like so dramatic for Jules Rimet that like he's so sad. And we just get no context about it.
Yeah.
Because Uruguay win this game, or they draw to win, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. You don't see the second goal.
No.
But anyway.
Yeah. But it's like, it's like Jules Rimet's going down in the tunnel. He's by himself. He's just upset. He hands over the trophy and he's just shattered.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is his funeral.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that ties this up at all. The only little thing that we get to nod forward is like, who's that man in the crowd? And there's a guy like 50 meters away just staring back at them when everyone else is watching the game. And it's like, oh, that's Joao Havelange. Oh, he might be important soon.
You think Jules Rimet's bad? Wait until you meet this guy.
And it's like, I think at this point in the film, when we get to the funeral and we see Annette just waxing lyrical about how much of a hero Jules Rimet was.
Yeah.
This is where I was like, this is a tough watch now. Like it's already just wild, but now it's like, this is just nonsensical. This is just a bullet train of nonsense.
Yeah.
There's like, and the timing is bizarre. They cut forward just unnecessarily. We just get this really odd story being told about a few specific characters. And then we also like to then skip. Like there are two English presidents of FIFA that we just skip by.
Yeah. We get up to, because the only election we see is when an English candidate is beaten.
Yeah.
By Blatter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like we now we see we're now introduced to like Joao Havelange, and he's talking to Stanley Rouse, who was at the time FIFA president. But it's like Stanley Rouse was FIFA president from 1961 to 1974. A while. Yeah. And then before that, I think it was like Arthur Drury, something like that, who was FIFA president from like 1956 to 61. So you got like 20 years of FIFA presidents that were English, and they've just gone, not important to what we want to say. We're just going to again bring them back, present them as like being racist, and also classist. Because they get like, our world isn't ready for those born less fortunate. It's just unhinged.
And the fact that if it doesn't relate to Blatter, because Havelange and Blatter are obviously very connected in terms of Blatter comes up as his secretary. And so if it doesn't connect with Blatter's timeline or his arc, then it's like it's just scrubbed from history. Yeah. It's
totally
unbelievable.
And it's like, we are not going to, nothing about the English in this whole thing. Out.
Yeah.
Like, we don't care. And it's like, I understand, cool, if you want to tell a story about something and you want to tell one side of it, but when it's just so filtered to remove this, And like we at the start, and there's just various points of the film where we move forward a year in time to see a 10-second scene, and then we just skip 20 years because we decide it's not relevant.
But then we spend about 2 minutes on the Havelange Rouse election, and literally for like 90 seconds, it's Havelange won, Rouse won, Rouse won.
Let's build some tension here.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, can we cut this, please?
And then it just stops, and we don't know who's won. And then just like, oh, Havelange has won. And you're just like, this is the most boring way to show an election.
Also, on the
ever.
board, Havelange was like, he had like 3 times the votes. It was never going to be close. Like,
it's like, I think John Oliver, when he spoke about this on Last Week Tonight, before it came out,
yeah.
and he was like, what idiots make a sports film about executives?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, this is why you don't, because there's just nothing to like grasp onto at all. And then it's really weird. Again, now they're showing like, okay, now apparently, like at the time, there was some dissatisfaction from like Africa, Asia, and Latin American countries about FIFA and their like Eurocentric focus and inclusivity and all that sort of stuff. And Havelange apparently did capitalize on that as part of his campaign. But again, then we see Rouse just being like, again, antagonistic of like, we have shot of like a group of African candidates and we just get like, Africans, oh, they'll never understand the subtleties. And it's just like, again, it's like, unless this was actually really said, like, this is kind of like needlessly trying to paint the other side as looking even worse.
Yeah.
And like, it wouldn't surprise me if the British like had some pretty like average views in these scenarios. But it's like, when you're like, so much of this is just purely fictional mess, it just feels like so much of that is just like, it's just going too far. And it's almost like you're using like racism to make yourself look better.
Oh,
and
totally,
it's really
yeah.
weird, I think. And I think it's really just not cool to do, to go like, I want my characters or the people that are on my side to look better. So I'm going to make these other characters racist and more racist than they might have been, even if they were somewhat racist.
I think it's
to
so
then push back against.
Yeah, and it's so driven by like their own delusion that like they control their own narrative.
Yeah.
Like even the whole introduction of the African Association. I mean, I don't think they're really aware of how that comes off on screen. Like,
yeah,
like they make this big point of like showing South Africa at the end of the film, like, oh yeah, like FIFA keeps its promises.
Yeah.
But it was like the whole duration of that, it was like, this guy is handing over votes for direct support. And like I don't know, like they hint at and suggest at corruption as if it's fine, as if it's just part of doing business. There's no like clear plan to like expand the game. It's like whoever gets to us first, whoever can like write the biggest check, which we've seen come true, like will get the support of FIFA.
Yeah.
And so like FIFA's expansion in the world often aligns with like the economic expansion of different associations.
Yeah.
It's just like incredible. It's so tone deaf. It's unbelievable.
And it's just so wild that we have like this whole idea of like FIFA being like throughout the film of like again, like I said before, like anti-corruption and like FIFA are all about keeping politics out of football. In a sense, they're like, we can use football to bring the world together. Politics, like we don't want to focus on that. But then this whole movie is purely politics. And it's putting themselves as like this up on this pedestal for world politics for 100 years. And that's just, we just constantly keep seeing how like they're just trying to make the world a better place, make the world a better place. There's, like you said, there's very little development of football in this film whatsoever.
But that is probably due to the fact that, you know, obviously there were payments made and everything. And I mean, this is, I know I keep bringing up FIFA Uncovered, but like, that's almost like the, like a supporting document for this film, because it gives you some context of what is actually happening. while you're watching it. You have to sort of decipher through what's real and what isn't. Most of it's not, but like that so many of those payments happened to developing countries, but nothing came out of it. That
Yeah.
whoever was head of those associations, Jack Warner's the most famous, example of that. But like, it's such a that's probably the reason why you don't see any
Yeah.
of it
Because this narrative, like, we care about Africa, we care about this.
Yeah.
But then we don't actually, what actually happened to that?
Yeah.
What happened to that, Zhao? Want to give some details?
And literally, like in FIFA Uncovered, they're showing like these empty buildings of like what are meant to be like these central academies for these associations. And there's just nothing there apart from like a FIFA logo and a Coke logo. And it's like, oh, that's as far as we got.
It's so, it's just, you're just lost for words when you watch it. It's at this point in the film we meet Sepp Blatter for the first time. And oh my goodness, like if you thought this film was bad in the first half, it takes an absolute nosedive into just bland nothingness for the rest of it. And it just becomes a Sepp Blatter puff piece with basically him just reiterating time and time again, I'm the good guy. If there's anything bad happening here, it's other bad people. I'm here to clean up the mess.
And I'm going to stamp out corruption. Like,
I'm going to...
Even with blowback from the other associations. No, I'm going to be strong and I'm going to stand up to them.
Yeah.
It's
so weird. Like, we first meet Blatter, like, he slinks into a room. There's like 8 of them meeting. Joao Havelange is like having a rant about wanting results and I want more money and everything like that. And then I just love this line. Sam Neill's like just looking around the room and he's like, a certain Blatter should be here. And it's like, there's 8 of you in there. One guy just walked in and he's like, certain Blatter should, where's, and then it's like, oh, Blatter, there you are. It's just like, you just have these like kind of needless shots where it's like, you feel like Sepp's gone like, well, I want this scene to, Zhao kind of ignored me when I first came into the room. So like, let's play that up. Let's start playing. Like, it's just so weird, these introduction of these characters and these relationships. And it just becomes so bizarre how like Blatter's painted as like an everyman, just a normal guy. Like he's eating croissants on the run, like while he's like going around town trying to do deals and just get by. And he's staying in very humble hotel rooms while he's calling Havelange, who's like swimming in his luxury penthouse apartment. Yeah. And it's just like Havelange is, when he's first introduced, he's going after the Brits because that serves Sepp Blatter's narrative at the time. But as soon as Sepp enters the film, he's like, well, now Havelange has to be the bad guy. We're going to flip that straight away. He's bad. I'm good, honest guy who worked hard. Yeah.
And I built this whole commercial enterprise, the modern FIFA.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not sure, like, and that part, going on the documentary, I think Blatter did expose it to sponsorship. That seems to be like he kind of bought in Coke and Adidas. But the other one that they don't cover, like, is the whole Adidas connection. Like, and they sort of stop the film before, like, a lot of the modern allegations come in because because they start selling the TV rights to Adidas and that becomes like a whole coercion story. Like,
that doesn't serve Sepp's plot, does it?
It's just, incredible.
Like, he meets with Adidas and he crunches the deal. And there's this beautiful line in there that Horst Dassler, from Adidas, it says to Sepp, he goes, the Olympics are political. The World Cup is about people.
Yeah, it's for the people. Yeah. Like, come on now.
Come on. Yeah. Like, there's no way. There's just no way that this is a film.
And like, he's so intent on the ball being they spend like 5 minutes on the ball, the tango ball, like being
Look at this printout here. Beautiful tango ball. If that's the star, I'll give you all the money in the world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's incredible. I was just wondering then, do you think like that FIFA will get like proper treatment, like another film,
like an expose one, or one that they're funded as a version?
No, not one that's funded, like like something that's external to FIFA. Like, do you think that someone will think that there is a story here, like the corruption story?
Oh, so like a second part, effectively, of FIFA Uncovered, like going
Yeah, but
further.
not a documentary.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see that. I feel like I wonder if there'd be a lot of legal issues probably,
Probably.
and I'd say FIFA probably would be willing to spend
To shut it
hundreds of
down.
millions
Yeah.
to shut any of this down.
Mm.
So, like, I guess if you did make it, you'd have to make it veiled. It's not about FIFA; it's about the World Football Federation.
I think it'd be incredibly hard to make. Like, one, it's hard to make it interesting. Two, you got all those legal problems. Yeah, even if this is done well, I'm not sure you've got a film. Like,
No, and so FIFA proved that like they ride past these corruptions
yeah.
because like, there was so many corruptions around the Brazil World Cup
Yeah.
in 2016. Obviously, 2014. So many corruptions around like Russia, Qatar, any of the upcoming World Cups and things too, and they just ride through it. And even if they get really heavily criticized, the tournament still goes ahead.
Yeah.
People don't really know too much about it because all the people we get to watch and broadcasters, they get paid heftily to go over and be like,
Yeah.
hey, it's all wonderful. What's going on? There's nothing bad here.
And there's never any redeemable characters. That's what's like so
Yeah.
depressing about the whole saga. Like, there's no one that comes in that like you can trust.
No.
Like, all the associations seem to be crooked. If they're not crooked, then they just don't get involved. Like, I think in that FIFA Uncovered, there was something like, wasn't it like 28 of the 29 delegates from FIFA resigned after Blatter resigned. And then there was just like this one guy, I think he was Dutch, and he's just looking there like you guys were taking bribes? Like, what? Like, I've just been like straight as an arrow here the whole time.
That's why I don't get invited to all the parties?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Is that why you're all turning up in these cars and I've still got my Camry? Like, what is...
So that's why you call me names at lunchtime in the canteen? What's this about? It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they just seem to, like, they're not immune to criticism. They just seem to ride it. And it's like the thirst for football, like, it just prevails. And it's like we end up going like, screw Qatar, screw the World Cup and all that. But I'm still going to watch the games.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, it's like you can't criticize fans for watching the games, really, because it's like it's not their fault.
Mm.
They're not doing this.
Qatar was, for me personally, I think the first time where I was like, I just don't want to watch this. It's the least amount of World Cup football that I watched, like, of any of the World Cups since I've been a fan. And it was just, there was something about the stench of that competition that was just, even down to like, them putting the coat on Messi when
Oh, yeah.
and it's just, that whole World Cup just has like this whole, it's just like, just so crooked, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like if we're talking about things in this film of being like PR pieces and puff pieces and propaganda and everything, it's like every kind of World Cup that we're having now, it's all just propaganda. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah.
And we're just stuck in this now of like everything is that.
Qatar, and they're probably not the only World Cup where human rights violations have been a part of it, but that's the part that like took it way further. It was like, okay, it's one thing to like buy a World Cup, but then for it to affect like the whole population, and they have like, well, not the whole population, but a big chunk of it, like, that just made it like next level, I thought.
Yeah.
Like,
I think there's probably elements too of that it's far easier for a lot of like the white media to turn and criticize like an Arab nation for something. But like if England have hosted the World Cup, like they're not going to be like, oh, should we criticize what's going on in England with anything that's happening there? So I do think that also probably does play a part in it. Doesn't mean that the criticism isn't valid either. But it felt like maybe Qatar was a little bit easier for these journalists from the English-speaking world to jump onto it and say, look at all the problems here, look at all the problems here. Like, the next World Cup's in the States.
to be fair, the issues were far greater than any in the developed world, I would think.
Of course.
Just from like the working conditions of people on the ground.
Yeah. I don't mean that as an excuse. I just mean that as like I feel like we should say that as a disclaimer of
Yeah, that's true.
as an explanation of why there was maybe more coverage about it. But the issues were like super serious. But ultimately still, Didn't matter. The World Cup went on.
Yeah, I know.
And then it's like nothing happened.
And the whole lead up to that tournament, I thought, oh, this can't. Surely there will be a backlash. Surely.
Yeah.
And there was a period there where maybe Australia is going to get the World Cup and going to step in, and they just somehow like money just cleans it all, just cleans up, and they just keep pushing forward.
Yeah. Just keep pushing forward.
It's incredibly depressing.
Yeah, it is. And I think that also is like what's pervaded a lot in this, again, the second half of the film, is that it's like we become more further. It's interesting to be like, I'm Sepp Blatter. I'm going to make a film that's about me not being corrupt. So I'm just going to keep saying I'm not corrupt. It's like, well, maybe just make the film about something else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like the only because just on that corruption angle and how depressing it is, like not just in the context of this film, but like with World Cups, I think that's maybe the only saving grace for some of the people involved in this film, particularly the actors. You can't exonerate the director or the writer because he was writing this crap, but like the actors, I mean, there was less public awareness of FIFA in 2013, 14.
Yeah, it was they could have read this and gone, this is a trash film, but I'll do it for a payday.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like, and you can't really, I don't know, besmirch an actor for doing that.
Yeah.
It still is a bit weird though when you have like someone like Sam Neill.
Yeah, I know.
And like where we're sort of up to in like the story of the film is we're around like 1978-ish now, and we still get like Havelange.
I'm impressed by your commitment to go through the whole timeline. Like I've sort of just checked out on the movie now, but like keep going.
There's not much left. Like there's a lot left, but it all just blurs into one blob.
Yeah.
But we get like, again, just shots of like, what shot are we going to show here? Oh, it's going to be Havelange talking about South Africa. You're not welcome until you deal with apartheid. And then he goes over to like his kids or his nephews playing Subbuteo. And it's just like,
that's the worst scene.
Imagine if God intervenes. Is that cheating?
That is so bad.
And then they go, but you're not God.
Yeah.
Run along, kids.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. It's like, okay, we better show FIFA again was against apartheid.
Yeah.
But then we still want to build up Havelange as being bad now because then poor Sepp has the nemesis.
Yeah.
So it's just these really confusing scenes.
Totally.
That make no sense.
Yeah.
And then interchange with like montages of World Cups of like 1978, just seeing like, oh, the whimsy of the tournament and like, these beautiful much of all this music going on and all this, and comments like Blatter in the 70s going like, we should be concentrating on the women's teams, when Blatter on like File, he's quoted as saying, hey, women's football would attract more viewers if they wore tighter shorts.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. It's like, okay, no, but in the film, it's like, no, since the 70s, I was pro women's football. Like, it just is, he's been sexist a lot of times and insensitive. And this is like the last, like, say, 20, 30 years covered in the film. It just becomes about painting Havelange as meaner and more evil, grabbing Blatter by the neck and threatening him. And Sepp just constantly, like, saying like, oh, there's the money, the corruption, I've got to sort it out.
Yeah.
It's like new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
And we just repeat this again and again and again.
And even like speaking openly, like with the journalists and like saying to the journalists, oh, I've got to weed it all out. It's like, it's just.
Totally. You get these random scenes that make no sense where someone else at FIFA is talking to his daughter and goes, you know what? I've worked with your father a long time. He's a very good man. Okay, great. Again, using like a female character, it's just like to soften up. It's just. I am lost for words at this stage because now we just go through different montages, and there's just quotes of praising Sepp Blatter. Havelange turns it like, look at you. You started at the bottom. You've worked very hard, and now you're at the top. What nemesis says that to someone? And this is basically what carries us out through the rest of the film. No football match is worth a man's life. Sepp Blatter quotes. You might want lucrative deals for Korea and Japan. Think again, everyone. This sport is spotless.
I liked the line. It's going back a little bit, but I had it written down here where Havelange is addressing his team of associates, and because FIFA is in financial trouble, and he says, "I don't care if you have to go to Castro or Mao.
Yeah.
Just find the." It's like, oh gosh, it's so bad.
Sepp did just while we're doing the script here, did Havelange actually say that? Yeah. Of course, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said that.
Yeah.
I think he said something even worse. What about? No, just stop. We'll just put it in. Okay, we'll put it in so you stop.
Yeah.
So you stop talking about this. But there's so much just cleaning of the hands. I'm not responsible for anything that happened before. But then also, I'll protect the family at all costs. It's very like kind of mob boss. We're jumping forward a lot, but like you said, it's really just drivel for the rest of it.
Yeah.
But the interaction I found was really, really interesting. Was it's around 2001, 2002, and I think it's Korea and Japan are butting heads culturally before the World Cup. And there's a book that's come out, accusations around FIFA, and I think it's Blatter's lawyer, who is basically in his office going, "Well, when will you do something to defend yourself?" Blatter replies, "I've done nothing that merits defense." And then the lawyer says, these are false accusations and you know it. What lawyer is...
Yeah.
What is this? And then the other guy in the background goes, "She's right, you know." And it's like, you've been betrayed by the same people who put you in power. And it's just so... It's just insanity. Like, if we were presented this film and you were like, this is a film from like Kim Jong-un about like North Korea, pure propaganda, this dictator leader. And it was just the same script, you'd be like, yeah, the lines all check out. They make sense. They could be reapplied.
But it's amazing as well, like how like corruption extends beyond, and corruption might be a strong word, but how it extends beyond the actual film, because this premieres at Cannes.
Yeah.
And there's the creative director for Cannes explains, oh yeah, we rejected it because it wasn't up to the quality of the festival. But then Gérard Depardieu got in contact and insisted, so we put it in. It's like, what? What kind of...
Okay, fine then.
What kind of... And so they had a special screening on the beach, apparently. And so it's like, what kind of creative director, like, one, does that, two, admits it, like, and could there be a more appropriate way for the film to get into a major festival than to, like, just sneak in, you know?
Yeah.
Just, like, it's just unbelievable. And it just shows that, like, you know, these you know, methods of working just extend, you know, far beyond, like, and I mean, like, common people, we're just so naive to it. Like,
yeah.
Or maybe not as naive as we used to be, but like, this whole thing of, I think there's just like this real public sentiment now that like we give up, like we can't control any of these forces, you know, like.
Yeah, and it's literally people living in their bubble.
Yeah.
And thinking they just do this thing, it's all sorted. Like, oh, the film's at Cannes, success.
Yeah.
People will then go and see it. Beautiful, Cannes prestigious film festival, of course.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you got to put it in, like, this is before it had like a meta rating of 1 and like an IMDb of 2.8 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, that should have served to validate the film. If it was like, you know, even remotely like of any quality, then it probably does. Like,
yeah.
And for a creative director to just go, oh, well, you know, this famous French actor insisted, I guess we'll put it in.
Yeah.
Like, surely the brand has some kind of, the Cannes brand has some kind of, you know, merit. Like, it has, like, I just can't believe that they would extend that.
And then we have to keep Gérard happy.
Yeah, and then suddenly
disappoint Gérard Depardieu.
And suddenly you've got Gérard Depardieu and Sepp Blatter walking the red carpet at Cannes. It's like disgraceful.
It's like it's just, again, just lost for words. Lost for words on it. And I think there's probably not that much like worth talking about for the rest of the film. Maybe just the ending, because we finish on like there's the monologue from Fisher Stevens again.
Yeah.
Carl, who's now shown as being like super old and is saying for over 100 years. And it's like, your character's dead now.
Clearly, yeah.
Why are we seeing you super old? Like, you would be well dead.
Yeah.
And then why is your monologue shown with this? It's weird.
Yeah.
But I think this kind of sums up the movie from FIFA's perspective. This federation, born of a dream, has survived 2 world wars, an unprecedented economic crisis, and made football the most played sport on our planet. And then it's like, we have more members than the UN, da-da-da. All this while, what you mentioned earlier, the girl playing on the dirt pitch, which she was put in goal straight away, and they just like scored penalties against her. And that story made no sense. But then now she goes in a hero run and just dribbles past everyone and scores. And then it says, who knew this ball would bounce to every corner of the earth and leave its imprint on the history of mankind?
Yeah.
As she's thrown up into the air.
It's just awful. It's just so bad.
And then we see the South Africa clip you mentioned earlier, giving Mandela the World Cup.
Yeah.
And then there's special thanks to Sepp Blatter in the end credits. Special thanks to our glorious leader, Sepp Blatter.
I don't think I've ever come across a film that's been so independently financed as to like one, like Azerbaijan throw in their 5 million, but 90% funding, like that's huge. Like, especially now, like most films now, you see like 17 production companies before like you get to the opening credits. But like just to throw in like 28 million to have complete creative control.
And it's like to tell as well a story about yourself and spend that. Like you might see an organization go, we're spending X million on this film because it's about this issue we really care about. And it's about, say, global warming or whatever. And we want to get this message out there to people. Not to be like, we want to clear our name and show how wonderful a bloke Sepp Blatter is. And show how FIFA has only been good for humanity in the last 100 years.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling.
It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's effectively a $28 million home movie.
It is. And it's like the really interesting thing is like if you watched it and saw it visually, like it looks like decent. As in it looks well made. Like it doesn't look cheap. Obviously by the budget, but which is just all the more bizarre. Like I wonder if you're not a football fan and you don't know anything about FIFA, if you see this film, I think you'd still go, this is rubbish. What did I watch? There's no story there.
Yeah.
I wasn't even really told anything. Like it's so uneventful.
Yeah.
But like I don't know if you'd step back and go, oh, this is actually, when you see how they've twisted the truth so much. I don't think you'd step back and maybe necessarily know all the facts to be able to criticize extra hard on those.
No, definitely not. Yeah. Awful. It's the last time you get to pick a movie. Like,
to be fair, we had to cover this at some stage.
Oh, we did, yeah. 2 seemed early, but I am glad that we got it out of the way.
I think get it out of the way. Because when you hear about a film being the worst film ever, destroying the career of the director and writer, 1%. If I hear a 1%, I want to see it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how can that be so bad? But like films like The Room and stuff like that, like at least you can maybe enjoy it because it's so bad. This, I don't think you can enjoy how bad it is.
Well, it's like what you said. It's like I think I wrote down like early on, like I've never seen such a an uninteresting bad movie. Like when you watch a bad movie, it's like sometimes it's like it's an interesting watch. Like The Room is funny at like in lots of moments, but like there's no humor in this at all. Like no. And like he says that he sort of put irony in there, but
where?
Yeah.
Where's the irony?
I didn't detect it.
Yeah, it's one to go to the heap. I think that's why I took so many notes on this film as well, because I felt personally responsible for bringing this.
But it was one of those films where it's like when you're watching it, and like I felt that that compulsion as well to like, oh, I need to look this up. And then suddenly it's like, well, no, give up. Like it's just there's so many like threads that are just wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I stuck with it. I don't know. No. Your pick next. Actually, no, wait, sorry, what do we how many penalties would you give this out of 5?
Oh gosh. Skied over the bar every time, for every star, for every penalty.
5 big misses.
Yeah, 5 big misses.
5 for like Baggio type.
Yeah. like out of frame kind of.
yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I don't think it's like it's worthy of anything.
Yeah.
And I see like why streaming services like we don't even want to show this.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be anywhere.
Yeah, it's like it's clearly got that status of like this film doesn't exist.
Yeah, and like I've seen stinker films before that have like a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Or like a 10 on Metacritic.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, to get below 3 on IMDb, like you got to be. I mean, Sepp probably put a few votes in.
yeah. What's this? John Blaffen? Well, it's just all these random names. They sound a lot like Sepp Blatter, but like it's just weird versions of it.
It's not Sepp, don't worry.
He just bought all these bots.
Well, I think to get the taste of that movie out of our mouths, we need something decent.
Yeah. What are you going to give us, Brendan? And you, like, I think I've been kind in a way here because now whatever movie you suggest,
it's got to be.
It's going to be better.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I could literally pick any of them that are on the list, and it's going to be like watching, Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
Like, but the one that I really want to revisit is The Damned United.
Oh, nice. Very kind.
Yeah,
it feels like I stitched you up by making us do this, and then you're like, "Let's just watch a good film."
Yeah. I haven't seen it in ages though, so I'm interested to revisit.
And I think it's listed on places as just United.
Oh,
I think sometimes they drop The Damned.
I thought that was a
depending on the
different
Or is that a
movie
different film?
because I noticed that came up on Apple TV, and I was like, "Oh, that needs to be added to the list." Okay, we probably need to do some research on that. Because I think Damned United was there as well. I don't know.
It could have been. It could have been
Yeah.
someone who just looks a lot like Michael Sheen.
And bloody hell, do I love Sheen.
I know.
Like, what an actor.
Yeah.
I know we'll probably talk about it on the next episode, but have you seen that monologue that he addresses like to the Welsh?
I'm so excited. It's like let's just jump in.
Yeah,
and let's get it out of the mouth.
Keep recording. He has this whole like I think it was on that Netflix show Captains. That
I think I've seen an episode or two of that.
Yeah. It'll be on YouTube. Like, there's this whole address before they go out for the World Cup, and it's just.
Oh, sorry. As in, this is the one that Michael Sheen actually does.
Yeah,
and is it on? It's on that British game show. I think it's on like that talk game show, the sport one that they have.
Oh, maybe that's a different one because this is maybe he does it twice because in this one he's like sort of addressing them like in the team hotel.
Maybe he did it again.
Yeah, he might have. And oh my goodness, like that guy is. We'll talk about it next time. Yeah. But jeez, I can't wait to go a deep dive into Sheen because he's one of my faves.
Yeah. Thank you, Brennan. Very kind. Very kind to give us that today.
Yeah, I mean, we might. It might not be a case of like having to check out halfway through the movie like this one. We might even watch it twice. Yeah. Who knows?
Might just do a series of 10 episodes.
Exactly.
I do think though it is important that we do watch like the bad movies as well.
Yeah.
And it's important, I think, to talk about a movie like this and all the things that are wrong with it.
I would just like bad movies with redeemable qualities.
There'll be a lot of those, I'm sure.
Yeah. It was just United Passions. I couldn't find an angle.
No, like Goal is coming up.
Yeah.
So...
It's like Goal is a good example. It's like it's entertaining.
Yeah.
Like, for sure.
I've never seen Goal 2 or 3.
Oh, I think I've seen 3 because, I had to watch it because it was in like the whole Real Madrid subplot, and they go into the Real Madrid rooms and everything.
Yeah.
And so Zidane features, and I think Gabba's. Anyway, we'll get on to it.
Yeah, we'll get on to it. Thank you for listening to Football Movie. I've been Dan.
I've been Brendan.
And let's never watch United Passions ever again.
Let's be united in never watching that excrement, as the Guardian refers to it.
Yeah, cinematic excrement ever again.